Hello, everyone. I hope you're
Well,
having a fantastic day. Today I'm joined with Nicolas Guérin, our creative director
it's me.
for Thunder Lotus
Nice to meet you
Games.
all. Nice to see you looking good, Med, as usual.
Thank you, thank you. You as well.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
why don't you start by introducing yourself? Like,
Yeah,
what?
absolutely. So I'm glad to be here with you guys today. It's an honor to follow in the footsteps of Med's incredible performance yesterday. So I'm Nick Garan. I'm creative director on Spiritfarer, and I've been with the company for a bit more than 3 years now. And I started working on Spiritfarer since almost the very beginning. And in addition to being creative director, I was also lead writer, which is the main purpose of my presence here for the topic at hand for LudoNarraCon with Spiritfarer today. So glad to be with you guys.
And I'm glad to be here with you as well. So, today we are discussing mostly everything that is the approach to narrative direction. So,
Right.
which is convenient considering you were the lead writer. So, why
Yeah.
don't you start by just explaining who we are and what like, who done what in the actual game and whatnot,
Yeah.
as I should start to show all of the assets that we'll be looking at today.
Sure, absolutely. So it's both quite simple and complicated. I mean, we started Spiritfarer with only me as a writer on the project. We knew from the very beginning that Spiritfarer had to be a very uh, narrative game, and the stories of the characters were front and center for us. So, um, in terms of who did what, I did all the what we call narrative direction, which is actually putting together all the parts that will make the narrative what it is. It's a huge part of how to understand what a narrative in the game is, and we're gonna brush on the topic for a long time today. And I was joined by two absolutely wonderful persons, Max and Alex, and the two of them were both level designers and writers. Who helped me tremendously writing the game, and more specifically the dialogues. We actually separated the dialogues almost evenly between the three of us. Max wrote a bit more of dialogues because he wrote almost all the very cool dad jokes and the denizens that we have in the game.
Which we all
And
love.
actually, yeah, it's cool. So yeah, we can go into details a bit later on specifically what were the steps of how we actually built the whole thing.
Sounds good.
But we are three.
Yeah.
And then we also had Sally Christensen, which is who were our awesome copy editor. Hey Sally, if you're watching us, but Sally helped us as well. But the whole team, I mean, everyone wrote what we actually did right, and we had tons of feedback from the community as well. So it was pretty cool.
Cool. Just so everyone can see who we were talking about. I don't unfortunately have any picture of Sally, but this
Yeah.
is Alex, who was also
How,
one of our
yeah.
level designers.
Look at them. Look at how handsome they are. I mean, these guys. Come on.
They're
I know, right?
they're lovely, and we love both of them very very much. And him looking
And
in the
Max.
distance, just
Yeah.
precious.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
so let's just start discussing like all the character backgrounds and just methodology that you were going with, as it is one of the key components of writing the game, from what I understood. Like trying to piece together what needs to be done in order to actually like start writing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a common misconception that the writing is just writing text and dialogues, which is in part true. I mean, you have to write dialogues to make the character exist, but I've always compared the dialogue writing to the tip of the iceberg, basically, because you have to create all those reasons why you write these characters first. And to me, I guess the uh, most important thing was to have the characters being true and being genuine to who they are, because we knew we wanted to tell real stories and actual real stories of dying persons. So the way it went was I started first by documenting tons of things. I mean, I spent times in palliative care wards. My own brother is head of ward in Nice, France, in the southern France, in the French Riviera. Yeah, which is a place where tons of old people go to, as the same for Florida in the U.S., for example. Tons of people go to spend their retirement there. So I get to meet tons of very interesting and cool people, and to be, I mean, I would say that to be actually honest, we had to tell stories that were in part gathered through interviews, and my own grandmother was dying as well. So I had tons of actual, data and background stories. And in addition to this, I also wanted to have, in a way, archetypes. We'll talk about this a bit later as well. But yeah, archetypes help having this cast of characters to actually, match with the design that Joe made. We'll talk about this tomorrow, I guess.
Yeah.
But where I was, I'm gonna be lost in my thoughts a lot today, guys. So help me out.
It should be all right. So we were mostly discussing archetypes and where this is
Right.
where we were going. But before we start, I did have someone asking a question in regards to important and sensitive topic, like if we had any staff working as consultant or therapist. And I presume you would you say that like the interactions that you had with your brother and like people in palliative care would be considered as such, or
I mean, yes and no. Yes, first, because of course you have to have that documentary approach where you meet people and then you get to actually have them telling their stories. But in terms of consulting work, we didn't do that much because we, from the beginning, this was meant to be a database of stories that we would actually morph into the spirit stories, which then go into more of an imaginative world where things are based on true stories, but modified and manipulated in a way that works in the game. That being said, it's an interesting question. I mean, every character is a composite of many true stories. We also have tons of stories that I gathered from team members at the beginning of the project. I mean, not at the beginning, but maybe a couple of months in, I actually asked people to, if they wanted, come back to me with stories of their relatives who passed away. Not just any relative, but people in their lives who had a huge impact on theirs. Because that was kind of the message in Spiritfarer, the idea that you are the sum of all these interactions you had with people who had a huge impact on you. So I had like Ulrich, our audio guy, helping us out telling stories. Mary, our artist, telling stories about her grandmother. So anyway, the characters you see in the game are a composite of all those stories. Astrid, for example, is heavily inspired by my grandmother, but also by some kind of other archetypal elements. Same for Giovanni, who used to be her husband, and my own grandfather.
oh, I think your audio just died for a bit. What's going on? Okay, it's back. Everyone's saying it's back. Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties.
It was really not,
I think my preamp just decided that audio was overrated, which for some
it's
reason
kind of overrated.
tends to happen. So we were discussing about your grandfather and Giovanni.
Right. Yeah, and Buck, I was saying that Buck was as well inspired by a very good friend of mine who died when he was 18, a very long time ago. And but yeah, my point was that it's part documentary in the sense that you have to fill up the stories with real stories, but you also add basically archetypal stories, but not archetypal is not the right word, but you add stories that make sense for the character and the type of person you want to have in the game, and also how it worked with Stella's story as well. But yeah, basically it then allowed us to craft and write very big backgrounds on the characters. As some of you guys know, I mean, these people, they had a real life. I mean, they're represented as animal spirits in the game, but they really had an actual life, well, in terms of character, which was when they actually interacted with Stella in the real world. And those bios were very, very big. I mean, I really wanted the characters to have, I don't know, if a 7th-page bio. Maybe you have something. I remember I showed you something about the tool, or I don't remember whom, but I took that, template and expanded it about what makes a character who he is and who she is, and it was a big mix. But definitely you had to know that story beforehand, before writing the character in the game. You had to know what the character was about in the real life, and then what happened to him or to her in the game, and what were their story arc, basically.
Right. Which makes total sense. I presume you did this process for every character, not just like the main cast, but also the NPCs as well, or
Um, Actually, more the spirits. The spirits are the ones that that we tell the stories of. I mean, we did that for the 11 spirits in the game. Oh, actually 12 now, for the 12 spirits in the game. Actually, one of them, the one that we released a couple of days ago, is not exactly a spirit. It's a bit of something new that we tried with Lily. But yeah, the other ones are most definitely spirits. And for the other characters, I mean, we're talking about, for example, the Theodore the raccoon or Albert the shark. Those are a bit different. They are inhabitants of the world. We'll talk about them tomorrow with Joe. And they are not really people who had a true interaction with Stella during her life.
fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. Cool.
Yeah.
And there's one thing that you actually sent me to
Right.
like work on that was related to like all of the spirits. Would you say that like the copy of Gwen, like the document that you sent that I'm
Right.
showing on screen, would that
Yep.
be kind of like the template that you were somewhat using for all of these spirits, like as one of these be the examples? Or
Yeah, absolutely. This is the kind of template that we had to fill up. I don't think we were that thorough and we filled up everyone as perfectly as Gwen, but in a nutshell, it was important to know exactly their life. Then it was important to know key elements for Spiritfarer, like, for example, what were their relationship to Stella? How did Stella meet them? What was the common history between the two of them? So between Stella and that spirit. For example, Gwen. Gwen used to be Stella's best friend, and then there is a whole story about her living back. Going to America, and then she finds a job, and then she loses a bit contact with Gwen. So all that
right,
um, story is told in the background bio that you're showing now. And in addition to this, it was important to understand what were the key impacts of Gwen on Stella. So, from Stella's perspective, who was Gwen, and what specific, what the type of relationship they had, what it actually gave Stella as a person. For Gwen, it's rather complicated, but it's in a way, Stella always looked up to Gwen. She was a bit older than her. She knew her from very young age. There's a very cool memory that you get to see in Hades Tower about the three of them. So Lily, Gwen, and Stella, biking together in the northeastern France. And yeah, so what was that key relationship was important to us, as well as what happened to Gwen, really. So Gwen died of a lung cancer. Gwen had total of unfinished problems with her family, with her parents, with her father specifically, and what Gwen had to go through, helped by Stella, and the other way around. And now that we had that story for Gwen, we had to tell a story in Spiritfarer in the game, which was translated into having a kind of little story arc within the game. And it was a story arc of someone dying all the time.
yeah,
Every spirit is built the same way. You have to know what they die of, and how does that translate into the game? What is their, if you want, a trajectory, narrative trajectory within the game? Um, Gwen, it was kind of special because she was towards the end before Stella arrived in the world of Spiritfarer and met Karen. So she took on herself to guide Stella through the waters of the afterlife at first. That's why she's kind of your
tutorial
tutorial
spirit.
person. Yeah,
Yeah,
she helps you understand what's going on. She tells you what's going on with the boat and with the islands and with all of what's going on in that world, which is a bit of a metaphor on how Stella always took Gwen for, which is that person who you can count on to go through the steps of your life. So we mentioned a story in which Gwen was there almost all the time. Stella had something happening and a major milestone in her life. Gwen was here for her, which in return Gwen says, "That's what you think, but I take it the other way. I think you, Stella, was here for me every time I had a problem." So that story was then translated into what happened in Spiritfarer. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's the idea of knowing the character really well, and then understanding what are their connections to Stella, and then how that then translate into the final moments of that character in regard to what Stella took away from that relationship.
That makes sense. That makes
It's a bit
sense.
complicated.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
as things tend to be. And how do you process like the narrative beats that happen inside of Gwen's story itself, like her escaping and like the
Right.
jellyfish and whatnot?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's something which is really important as well. It's part of the message of the key components to that had to appear in Spiritfarer to us, which were um, what are the teachings of these characters? What do they teach Stella? For Gwen, it was tons of things. Of course, as I said, every tutorial aspect of the game is taught by Gwen. She also taught Stella how to craft fabric, so how to weave stuff. That's why you get to find the loom with her quest, so which is a teaching, which was reversed from the initial conception that we had of basic, farm simulator in which you get to have, I'd say, components and the mechanical, facilities in which you can do stuff and progress your crops and things like this. In Spiritfarer, it's actually the same idea, except that this idea is taken into account for the teachings of the spirit. So Gwen teaches how to loom. It's not actually a verb. Gwen teaches how to weave to Stella, and then you get the loom, and then she tells you how to do it. Every spirit also had to have a very specific moment that were what we call exotic, in the sense that it doesn't rely on the basic mechanics of the game. For Gwen, it was that idea of moving away, and not just moving away. She wanted to commit a suicide. She actually was part of her story in real life. She did
Right.
that once, and Stella was here for her at that very dark moment in her life, because she knew she was already dying of lung cancer, and she wanted to uh, be off with it. That element of story was actually taken from a story that I received when I was, in a hospital in France, of someone who told me this, which is, I know I am dying and I want to go on my own terms, but then it felt selfish for that person. And it really inspired me to incorporate that element in Gwen's story, which is, it feels like you're um, basically abandoning your duties. It feels like you're being a coward is a too strong word, but it feels like you're basically resigning on life. Say, okay, that's it. I know I'm
Right.
going to die and I want to do it myself. And then Stella is here. And then for Gwen, she's thinking, but yeah, no, I will, even if it's tough, even if I know that's going to be not as easy as going my way, at least I'll be here for her. Which is what she does. That's why she flees to her parents' manor, which
Right.
also symbolizes her unfinished problems with her family and what it meant for her. Actually, a fun part: the Villa Maggiore in the game is the only actual real place. So it's the only place in Spiritfarer which is exactly the same in the real world, in the sense that Villa Maggiore was the real name of Gwen's parents' manor in northern Italy. That's where she grew up, going for the holidays, and it's the only place. Every other island in Spiritfarer is an
Inspired.
imagination of still inspired by
Right.
something, but this one is actually the one.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that. That's cool. And that sounds good. And how about we talk about a tool moving down the line?
Yeah,
How did he come about? Would you say?
I told you, Matt, that Atul was very first inspired by you. Did you know that?
I
For real?
remember you telling me that he was inspired by I forgot his name. Someone from
Yeah,
another
Ulrich's
dev.
uncle.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. So as I said at the beginning, the spirits were first a bunch of archetypes. Again, tomorrow we'll talk about the mythological inspirations behind them. But
Right.
Atul was that cheery person, that person that you think is cheerful all the time, and in general, and I don't wanna throw you under the bus, my good friend here, but in general, it's really cool. I mean, when you encounter someone who is that, um, you know. Uh, life-loving person that has had that much energy, it's really really nice. I mean, it's always cool to be in contact with a person like this. That being said, more often than not, you tend to hide your wounds behind that kind of persona, right? No, I'm joking.
Well,
I
you
don't
would be correct.
but it's a way to cope with some issues. We all have issues in our life, and we have all ways to deal with them. And being overly cheerful all the time is something that might hide something, which was the case for Atul. Atul was the person that always extremely cheerful, always extremely enthusiastic about everything. That handyman who always knows what to do with things. Hey, if you have a problem, he was always be there for you. Like, I know how to fix your light bulb or your bike or your whatever. He will be here for you. He will lend you a ladder, a hammer or something. He knows how to deal with things. But he's hiding a very, very deep wound, and he's going to be very bad at expressing that. So bad that he won't do it.
Right.
And yeah, that was a very sad story. And the what happened with the tool is that we had that on face value very, very cheery character that who was hiding something very, very dark and was completely unable to express it. Which is why he left. Basically, Atul in Stella's life, he left, which is fun because even ourselves, we don't really know what happened. My theory is that he committed suicide as well. Some other writers, they think he just left and was never been found again. But he basically disappeared in a finger snap from Stella's life, which is why we did that with the character, with Atul disappearing out of the blue and not being led to the Everdoor, and you don't see Atul dying, you don't see Atul living, and which is actually another way of having that hole in your life of not knowing what that person happened to him. So yeah, and it was also inspired by a team member's uncle who died very, very rapidly, and who was that extremely enthusiastic, overly expressive character in his life. Atul is a fascinating character because you see people like that, and it's hard to scratch behind the surface and understand what motivates them. Atul is fascinating. It still is. All of them are, but yeah.
In their own separate way, which makes a lot of sense. And speaking of what makes them like particular and very unique in their own sense, let's just dive into how we actually went on to create One Spirit. If can you walk me down the line of like what goes on in one person's day as a writer, or straight up just how we go about like starting a spirit?
Right. So from a development perspective, Atul is we can talk again about Atul because we talked about him right now, but
Might as well.
that's it. Atul was that archetype at first. Archetype, which is that enthusiastic, cheerful character archetype. Then we go back to the story. So I mixed elements from characters I knew, from you, my friend, Med, from other people that I knew, even from personalities. You can have actors, you can have even characters from books and movies. Anyway, you do that constellation of influences to create the character. So Atul is a mix of a ton of people. Maybe towards the end, more influenced by Ulrich's uncle. Ulrich was an audio designer with us on Spiritfarer. And then you write the background that you saw, which is a very high number of pages about the character. Yeah. So Max took on him to define more Atul in his background. Then we go on to, as I told you, the what's going on with him in the game. So basically, what are going to be the requests Atul is going to formulate. So for Spiritfarer, it was a couple of things. We knew Atul was going to be linked to fishing, so that's why he fixes the fishing rod for Stella. We knew Atul was here to exploit more than other characters the cooking system, so the cooking mechanics. So Atul is that exuberant, what's the word? Epicurean kind of guy who loves food, and he loves to talk about food, and he loves to ingest things. The concept of the tool is that he was the only character that loves every food that is served to him. He doesn't have any dislike. Every character they have their likes and dislike and favorite food. And Atul is like, he's got his favorite food, but he doesn't dislike anything. He likes everything he's been given. So which is also a way to express his personality. And then that connection with food led to the character being requesting for specific food items to Stella, so to the player, which was a way to go forward and use the cooking system in the game. as a progression system. As for his story arc, we knew that basically, okay, what we did for every spirit was I came into the first meeting of the quest design, the request design with the designer. So only me and one of the designers, so either Max or Alex. And
Right.
I started by having that graph where I drew a line, and this is the, in a nutshell, the emotional curve of the characters. Atul was like a very, very, very high line, but he's gonna be very hyper and high and happy all the time, and then boom, he disappears. That's it. There was no progression, no weird wavy thing. It was just like flat, happy, disappear, which was weird and interesting because it allowed us to have that character who fell this way. I know tons of players are a bit, sorry guys, a bit angry at us for having a tool disappear. And maybe some of you guys didn't even understand what was going on, which is a bit of a problem. But it was entirely intentional.
Most definitely.
I don't know if it was, the execution might not have been perfect, but it was meant to be this way. So in terms of again, request design, a tool was crafted this way. So from that moment, then it comes back to the designer to actually implement all those quest and request beats in the game, which means the request. So that first request is Atul is going to want to have the sawmill. He's going to teach you how to use the sawmill and to cut wood into perfect planks. Well, perfect. Actually, not perfect because it's a kind of a hard mini game. I'm speaking. I'm sorry.
Very much is.
It's not a fan favorite, but it's one I like because it allows you to use the stick or the buttons on the keyboard in a weird way, and it's also there to remind you that Atul is actually really good at what he does, and you might be not as good as him. Anyway, so Samuel, and then elements of he wants the pork chops, and he's gonna want other food items afterwards. So Max did actually create all the steps in Unity. He created the story, and then he made a first pass of the dialogue that we reviewed. And once this is all in the game, we tested it. I mainly played the game, and then I was in a position to say, this is the whole flow, so it's going to take, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 hours, the whole length of a tool's request up until the end, up until the moment he disappears, and right after the final feast that he organizes for everyone back in Hummingbird. And so you go towards a very long sequence of iteration, then you play the character, you play all those moments in addition to what's going on with the other spirits on board, and then you basically fine-tune all these moments to make sure that the flow works. It's not too long or too short, and it fits with what I had in mind for the character story arc within the game. So in a nutshell, that's about it. Plus tons of other things like designing Joe designing the constellation in the sky, making sure that his home is something that looks like, it is a part of him, is an expression of his own personality. There was still an element which is fun, and I actually kind of regretted it afterwards. So it's just not a spoiler, but insider's revelation. But as I said at the beginning, the spirits are people and not animals, and it's hard to always stay focused on that concept because it happened that we allowed some elements of her animalistic personalities to be showcased in the game. That's why Atul is a frog and sleeps in a vat, which is kind of awkward because he's a person and other spirits they sleep on beds and they don't behave like animals. But it's just way too fun. I mean, when we saw that, remember when Alex made that animation of Atul sleeping, and then we all saw the weird really aquarium, filling up with water, and then you see Atul sleeping. It was it has to go in the game. It's just way too good. It's okay if it does not exactly represent an actual person, but more a frog than a person. It was fun.
Totally agree.
But yeah.
Although it didn't make sense for the context of like it being a person, it was most definitely very fun to see, and I think a lot of people do join me in agreeing that they actually really like his bed. So
it's not really a bed, but he sleeps in the water.
That is fair. Well, you could considering it a waterbed, as one would put it.
That's the good one, the waterbed.
Yeah. So
that's really good.
Speaking of animal and like the characters, that's something that as someone actually asked us on Discord, like since they
Right.
were all based on deceased individuals, like how did we decide exactly like who would become what and what like person would become which type of spirit slash animal? Like,
Right. Again, it's a bit weird, and I don't wanna, what's the word? But I don't wanna withhold too much. But it's a question we're gonna ask more tomorrow. But to go not into many details, but actually, it's kind of a reverse thing in the sense that, um, if I remember correctly, Joe, our art director that you guys are gonna meet tomorrow,
yes,
she well, actually,
they,
no, it's entirely true. Yeah.
yeah,
So Joe, they made tons of cool characters drawing, and those characters were kind of animals by themselves. And from that point, when I arrived on the project, the characters, they already had their animal shapes, but they were not characters. They were more, picture the beginning, the very first conceptual phase of Spiritfarer as um, the team trying to find a very cool way to represent spirits. And we had, well, Joe, they made tons of different tons of different characters. I mean, we had like a very vast number of them. But some of them they stuck and were like, okay, yeah, this one is really really nice. And for example, Atul was part of them. So there was no actually the form, the shape, the animal form of the characters came a bit before they were defined as persons. So it was a bit of a chicken and egg thing because
okay,
probably Atul, which was not called Atul by the way. I think his first name was Charybdis, which is a mythological name. Again, more on this tomorrow.
right,
But he was a blue frog from the beginning. And then when we looked at the characters, yeah, that blue frog. So maybe the concept of having an archetypal, cheerful, enthusiastic character came from that visual presentation
okay,
of a tool. Uh, but then from now on, we would build the character to be what he was. So yeah, I'd say that from to be entirely honest with you guys, I think the spirits were drawn. Some of them were drawn first, and then I was inspired by this, and then we crafted characters out of those spirits drawn by Joe. Uh, I don't recall. Yeah, maybe a few. No, actually, that's not true. I think the characters they were all uh, designed. I mean, designed, drawn.
drawn
So
first,
visually designed
yeah.
before they were actually narratively designed.
Right. So we didn't really plan like the archetypes to be specifically tied to a spirits before we created the spirits. It was more the other way around where we saw the spirit and it was like, right, this spirit does remind me of certain narratives, certain archetype that we would attribute it to it, essentially,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yes. But it was as it's. I mean, it goes back to the actual. It feels like a century ago, but
Which is
um,
fair because it's been
yeah,
we've been working on the game for like 3 years, so
yeah, that's right. And a year and a half in a year in a pandemic where I felt like from April to August, it feels one long day of 800 hours. But
indeed.
yeah, the once the characters were designed by Joe, then they were took back by me. Some of the elements were then again incorporated. So Joe, they actually took the character and they redesigned some of the elements, like the floral elements and what the floral means, what the floral symbols mean for the character.
Right.
And yeah, once we had this, the character were a bit more fleshed out in terms of who they were. Going back to the huge area of animation spent by Alex Boyer, our animation director, which is when the character had to be defined. Because the first question Alex would ask me was, "But who is that person? What is his or her attitude? How does he move? What does he do? And if she eats, how does she eat? I mean, what's her animation? What is her personality?" So
Yeah.
it had to happen right before that moment because I had to tell Alex, yeah, well, we know who Atul is now because I've worked on him and I know what he represents and what his personality is and how it should shine through his animations.
Yeah.
So it kind of was a back and forth at this time.
Which makes a
But
lot
yeah,
of sense. Sounds good. How about we go into talking about Summer, which is another character that a lot of
Right.
people very much enjoyed and had a lot of deeper connection given the spirituality aspect to her character. So, how did she come about?
Yeah. Actually, when you talk about summer, it reminds me that something people will be happy to know is that we also had one of the first question Joe asked me was um, how animalistic they were, and that's we created a scale pretty early on in the project, which was scale on on three form 1, 2, 3, so 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
and the well, let me think. The higher the number, the least animal they were. So a
Right.
character at the grade 1 was really animalistic in the way he or she behaved, rather than and then 3 being a
Very
character
human.
that felt like he or she was a human.
Right.
Which also in a way helped us have these characters being um, closer to their animal form, or more further away, more remote from who they were, actually what they were incarnated into. But yeah, for Summer, it happened that this character had a grade of 3, so it meant that so Summer is a garter snake, and her flower is oxeye daisy, if I remember well. I think it is, and
Yeah.
she had a grade of 3, so it meant that she had to be a snake that behaved like a human. I think it was also meant to be kind of a weird curveball to Alex, and to
Yes.
say this is an animal that is very hard to animate as a real human being. Can you do it? Yeah, can you do it? And then he was like, yeah, I can do it. So okay, let's try it this way,
And
which
she
is
pulled
why
it
he
off.
had that weird that very nice robe. She has that very nice robe, and the flowers in a girdle. Anyway, so in addition, this character, when the character was drawn by Joe, felt like a very peaceful person. And lo and behold, it also reminded me of many people I encountered during my research on end of life. And one woman in particular struck me because she was so wise, so caring, and so what's the word? She was so in tune with her life ending,
Right.
and
Okay.
it's humbling to see someone that, because when you're not dying, you're scared shitless of death. I mean, it's something that is really, really, really scary.
That is fair.
Uh, yeah, so it's hard to meet those people that are gonna die, and so she was so um,
In
fine with it.
tune
I
with
mean,
it.
she said, my life is lived and it's okay. Um, so then I guess that archetype of having a character who is very, 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 at peace with her condition, was extremely interesting. To have a character who is very mellow. That's why she is also teaching you how to play the guitar, and in that world it works, which is fun. I don't know. I won't judge. Maybe it works in real life, but I
Well,
mean, some yeah.
that does remind me that someone was actually asking like what inspired us for like to have Summer actually like play the guitar to grow plants. Like, how did that come about?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's the whole point. Which is, in general, and I really don't want to judge, but some people are more mystical than I am personally, as a person, and I've always admired those people who can make connections through some, um, I don't know, some astral personality, mystical connection to the world. Because when
Right.
you don't have it, you feel a bit more bare and naked. You don't have that layer of spirituality that helps you, deal with things in real life, or you replace it with something different. But I personally don't have it. So I wanted a character who had it, and I didn't want her to be. I didn't want us to be judgmental towards her convictions.
Right.
So she's a mix. She's a mix of someone who is extremely spiritual, yet sometimes a bit too on the magical side of things. Where she tells you things about stones, and it's a mix of person who is really spiritually connected, but sometimes she goes a bit the extra mile. That, yeah, I'm not entirely sure about aquamarine being that useful for things, but maybe not. I don't know. But you seem to believe it. Fine, we'll do that for you. So Summer is that person, and also it's a bit of I don't know, an extra piece of of background on her, but she is a baby boomer, right?
Right.
She dies quite old in her 70s. She's still in good shape, beyond the fact that she's got breast cancer, but she was in good shape in her life generally. She was a vegan when it was not fashionable to be a vegan, or actually when at a time period where it was actually much rarer to find vegan persons. And it shows that she was kind of in advance on her time, and she thought about things that no one else was thinking about back then. And she's also part of that spiritual movement of the 60s and 70s. She's kind of an old hippie. I mean, she says it. She was of that generation who is a very flower power period. And people might. I'm 41. You're a bit younger than me, actually. Tanya, you're young. You're
I'm
young.
28, so yes.
There you go. But my parents are from that generation. I mean, they've been my parents being French. They didn't go to Woodstock, but they are part of that hippie generation that thought about new things and pretty new age, and they thought about things in a different way. So Summer was a hippie in the 70s, and then she moved from it. She changed. She had a job in agriculture in the 80s and 90s, and that's what killed her basically, because she was in contact with very harsh chemicals as a bioengineer in the 90s. And anyway, it's to have that. Summer was also helpful for us to have that clash. On one side you have her work as a chemist, and her conviction as a spiritual person that was a big that basically created a knot of a problem for her in her life, and she took that to integrate in her conviction and her spirituality and transmit that to Stella. So life is more than just material things and us dying, and the universe is bigger, and you have to feel yourself as part of a whole. So that's why she teaches Stella how to meditate in the big stone in Furugawa. It's not in Furugawa, it's another island. Anyway, so that's why she sings to plants. That's why she meets the dragon. She actually talks about the dragon as being her cancer, and she doesn't want to bit him. She wants to help him out, which shows her personality as well.
Right.
Anyway, she's a very, very, very interesting character.
And what
I say that all the time.
They all are interesting. Otherwise, we wouldn't have wrote them, right?
It's just that I feel that the funny part is that we know them so much that, and we knew that we wanted to withhold a bit in the game, and we don't want to tell everything about everyone, and because you don't really know that. I mean, the game is watched through Stella's eyes, and Stella saw some things, but she didn't see everything. So us as writers, we know way more about the characters than Stella ever did as a person. So it would have been not truthful to portray them in a very complex way, knowing that Stella would never have known all those details about them. That's why they're not that much explained heavily in the game.
Which makes sense. Someone did ask a good question in chat.
Right.
They were saying they were a bit sad that there wasn't more additional uses for like spiritual stone or trees, like except for the one quest. Was it like cut for any other reasons, or was it just never there? Because she does talk about a lot of like all of the raw contents and all of these like spiritual stuff. Was it like stuff that we just decided not to go more into, or was it just like cut content type thing?
It's a very complicated question. The thing is, I guess I was afraid that we would give more. That's not the right wording. Okay, so Spiritfarer is kind of an agnostic game. We don't take any stance on spirituality ourselves. We don't talk about is heaven true, is heaven something that is right, are the religions right, from the three big monotheistic religion to any other type of religion or spirituality or belief or faith. We didn't want to go into taking a position. Again, it's seen through Stella's eyes, so it's her own perception. Weird, I'd say, dreamy perception of what's going on with her life at those moments. So about stones and things, as I said, playing music to plants in Spiritfarer works. So this is kind of a fantasy thing that happens in the game, because again, it might work in real life, but I don't think it works that well in life. I mean, if you play guitar to plants, they won't grow visually speaking.
Although it would be convenient, I
It
don't
would
think
be
it is
really
the
cool.
case.
Yeah, it'd be absolutely awesome. But yeah, the same goes for any type of magical energy or more pragmatical uses of stones like this. I was just afraid of giving into the idea that it's something we endorse, because I didn't want to endorse anything. It's up to the player to make on their own mind about this all. As for the stone, it was meant to be a spiritual place, in the sense that that's what Summer shows Stella to be there. For the meditation part, I believe we had a different way of using the feature at first. I think you could go in front of any stone that had a shimenawa, you know, the Japanese,
Right.
what's the word, weaved.
Carving, you mean?
Yeah,
Thing?
exactly.
In front? Yeah.
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
right, because it's a sacred stone, and it means that that stone holds the spirit of something in Japan folklore and culture. But yeah, so you could go in front of any of the stones, and then the stone could talk back to you, I believe. But we had tons of technical problem with this because we wanted to do it, but it was just not feasible for many weird reasons. So we had to move forward from this, move back from
Away
this,
from it, yeah.
move away from it. Yeah, thank you. Which was a bit of a shame, but I mean, we just couldn't do it. But beyond that, yeah, no, it's more of the concept of not trying to keep we were setting a fine line between magical things and mundane mundane in the sense that normal, ordinary things. But yeah, we didn't go that much into the power of stones and the mystical energies of things. A bit later, in a weird way. It's all metaphorical anyway.
That is
Sorry, I'm
completely
confusing, but yeah.
I mean, it does make a lot of sense that, considering we didn't really specifically wanted to take a stance over it, more so being part of the narrative of their essentially life, being
Yeah.
just like a visitor trying to understand how everything intertwined. And I feel like we probably did a very good job at that. Wouldn't you say?
I don't know. I don't want to flatter ourselves, but it's
Fair enough.
but it's just that, yeah, we try to take a look at this, being really not judgmental, trying
Yeah.
to understand who these people are and believing in them, whatever they believe into. I don't know if it's a weird sentence to say, but we wanted to make sure that if it worked for Summer, it worked for everyone else, and if
Right.
it worked for another, if it worked for Giovanni, it worked for Giovanni. So we didn't want to judge people. We kind of did in a way. I mean, of course, Elena is a dick to everyone. Yeah, that's who she was. I mean, and anyway, it's just that you can't sugarcoat things too much. People who die can still be, not great. I mean, it happens. Again, the whole intention was to portray a death in a realistic manner. So yeah, and again, you can be someone pretty nasty and still have empathy for that person. That's what Stella felt, and that's what we felt. That's what I felt when I met them.
Yeah.
Not everyone I met was awesome. Some people were kind of weird, but you can't really separate this from the fact that they're dying, because it's really emotionally involving. But anyway, so yeah, so if it was true for Summer, it was true for the game. But it was each spirit had their own reality in a way.
That's fair. I see that we're starting to run out of time, so I do have two good questions that I really wanted us to talk about. One person was asking, was saying that our ability to narrative kind of intertwines in different ways, and each plays really well from a design perspective. How did we manage to design and build it in such a way that it kind of intertwines seemingly perfectly as we were going through the game, because everything is separate yet cohesive?
That means the spirit stories and the quest elements and all this.
Yeah, basically, how did we manage to build it in such a way that as we're going through the game, we can have it from every perspective, given that the game isn't really driven in one direction. We can just go about from every direction.
That's a very interesting point, actually. that's okay. So I don't believe that games should tell a story. Well, actually, many games do that pretty well, and
Yeah.
would be hard. What's the word? Really don't want to, throw shade on everything, but to me personally, as a game designer, I think that games should try to attempt telling stories their own way,
Right.
which means that you should interact with the story through the game mechanics, through what the game requires you as a player to interact with as systems. The concept of agency is really important in the game, which is what is it that you can actually do to interact with the world, with the virtual digital world that is in front of you. And stories to me should be told this way, which means that for Spiritfarer, it was a choice to not tell a story in a straight line. So every character they do have, their story is a mix. To me, a told story is told through many devices, many outputs. Yes, there are the verbal communications that he makes. So you have a text that tool gives you when he requests something from you. So again, pork chops. Tool will tell you about pork chops. But then we had another device which was what we call narrative moments. So another part of stories that he can tell verbally is delayed through the game. So depending on when and how you talk to him in between requests, he will give you a piece of his own story. So the first two elements are text, dialogue, basically. But then the way he fixes the fishing rod, the way he talks about the sawmill, the way he wants people to have participate in a big feast at the end of the game, and then eat what they like the most is part of his story. So yeah, it turned twice because there is no real intention to be made differently. I mean, it was not a conscious effort to actually try to mix them together. It was all mechanical because that's how, to me, a game should be built. You have all these mechanical elements that will tell a story by themselves, in addition to separate narrative elements, which are dialogues, so actual text written by writers that we were. Now, if it intertwines well, thank you very much. I'm very happy that it worked in the game, and I know it's not always easy to be exposed to a narrative this way because we're not used to it. I mean, we're used to read books and watch TV series and movies and things in which narrative has a beginning, a middle, and an end, a conclusion, a climax, well, a structure, a narrative structure. Which is not the case at all in Spiritfarer. You have narrative elements that then you discover as you go, as you go through the different parts of the game. So that's short answer, not intentional, but intentional in the same way.
Right. And did we have like some form of idea of how we would go about like doing such a basic outline of how the narratives would somewhat intertwine, or was it really just mostly unintentional, I guess?
Well, yeah. When I say unintentional, it's not extremely constructed, or not like every element is not meant to happen. Every element, in the sense that, yeah, you could find a tool and you can do something for a tool, but then you could do something for Alice at the same time,
Right.
and some players could do something different way. So it kind of mix. So the actual efforts we made towards a cohesive whole where a flow, so which character is required to find after which character. Some characters are blocking the progression, so you have to release some characters to get the flowers that will help you build the rock barrier destruct. I'm the name of the rock thing. Sorry, you guys know that better than me. But the addition to the boat that helps you go towards new zones in the game.
Right. The rock breaker.
So basically, yeah, there is a flow, but that flow is loosely defined. It's meant to have you interact with the world in your own way. But so yeah, it's thinking of let's say I have tons of beads in a bag and I throw them on a table and just I loosely rearrange them to make sure that the red bead is much further away from the green bead and that there are not too many beads at the same time. But it's only loosely organized. It's organized, yes, a bit, but not extremely well, step by step defined.
Makes sense. And as for the final thought, given that it is now 2 p.m.,
Yeah.
how does it feel creating such a compelling narrative that has touched so many people? Verbatim, a question that I received, so I figured I'd forward it your way.
humbly thank you very much. It's always heartwarming to hear this. So thank you very much. And well, I think it's extremely touching to see that many people being moved by the game, as much as it moved us when we crafted it. But yeah, the kudos to the whole team as well. It's not just a narrative. I mean, yes, narrative is important, the characters are important, and who they are is important, but everything works toward that same goal, which is feeling who these characters were and having empathy for them and understanding that people who had an impact in our lives are really the one who shaped us and will always be with us, no matter what, which is the only the only, if ever, silver lining you can find in the concept of life being short and you pass away. It's the only thing I ever found to be actually a bit of comfort, to know that people in your life had an impact. So it worked in the game for Stella, and I'm happy it worked for you guys as you played through Spiritfarer. And it goes towards the idea that the characters just need to be true, genuine. They need to be someone you think could actually exist.
So
Some
they
of them
need to
actually
be
exist
very
in a way.
human, essentially. They just need to be someone that you could imagine yourself being like connected with in real life, from what I understood.
Absolutely, and they're so close to actual real humans, to actual real stories that have been told to us by real people, real team members, and I mean they are in many ways actually real persons. So yeah.
Very much. Well, this is our time. Unfortunately, we will have to leave. But thank you so very much
Yeah,
for
thank you very
joining me.
much.
And we will come back tomorrow to discuss more of the art style and more of the mythological aspect to the game. And as for
Yeah.
the fourth day, we will be discussing more everything that is tied together with Stella herself and all of the spoilers with the entire narrative. So you won't want to miss that out. Otherwise, I have been Med. He has been Nico. And do you have any word you want to close on?
Well, I was really happy to be here, and I can't wait to be there again with you guys tomorrow.
Well, sounds good. So have a good day, night, evening, everyone. I hope to see you all tomorrow. Thanks
See
for
you guys
joining.
tomorrow.
Don't
Thank you
forget
very
to
much.
follow and do all that jazz. And goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.